Welcome to Just Healing, where we rediscover humanity in the conversation around trauma and celebrate all the unique ways we love and heal. I'm one of your Season 2 hosts, Dr. Debra. Let's listen, let's learn, let's heal.
Latino community or Latinx community is so diverse. In our culture, you don't talk about these things. Yeah, no, it's taboo. You just don't go there. There's always a reason why somebody behaves or does what they do. Be mindful of that because you don't know.
Hey everybody, welcome. This week we're going to be talking to Crystal Flores, who's my baby that I have mentored throughout a lot of her career. And we're going to be talking about the Latinx or Latina community and male trauma survivors and what that means and why they don't disclose and how that is specific to that community. So hold on, sit tight, and I'll bring Crystal right on in. Crystal, hi, how are you?
Hello, good morning. I'm good. I'm excited to be having this conversation, especially with you. I know you've mentored me since grad school, since I was like a little baby student in
A
grad
wee
school.
student when I still had the red office.
Yes, with the famous red couch.
That everybody slept on.
Yes,
Including me
or
when I was
cried on.
pregnant. There was
Or
a lot of
yes,
crying. And candy.
yes,
And candy. Lots of candy.
and free candy. Yes, everyone loved the free bowl of candy.
Yes, I was famous for that. But we got a lot done, and you've helped me in my journey also as a professional. Now I get to mentor you, and it's really amazing. And why don't you tell people what you've been up to? Because I bet you some of your classmates don't even know all of the stuff that we've done together.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on, and I don't share a lot publicly, but you know me, I'm the behind the scenes person. I'm like the little motor that's pushing things forward. That's how I feel like I've been with you, like you've been helping me and I've been helping you by pushing things forward. So the past couple years, wow. So you stayed in contact with me. You contacted me and you were like, "What are you doing with your career? What's going on?" Once a year, I would get that check-in, and I was like, I'm not happy where I'm at. I know I want to, do something different, but still related to mental health. And then we decided, well, you called me and you said, look, this is what I'm doing. You want to do this with me? First, we created some online courses, right? And we started an online university, called Listen and Love University. And we're basically trying to get curriculum online, trying to get this platform started that it's still building and growing, and it's exciting to see it. Like, I think in the beginning we didn't really know exactly what it was going to turn into, but it's all kind of falling into place now.
Right. It's the LLU. You can learn something new and learn about you. And but now we've also started, what did we start? The Male Trauma Institute?
Trauma Institute. So now we started a virtual clinic called the Male Trauma Institute, which I kind of see as now like, okay, my baby, because I feel like the way that you work is like, all right, Crystal, here's this thing, run with it, see what you're gonna do with it. So yeah, we started this virtual clinic, and we're building that up. I think right now we're working on getting people to know that we're here, that we exist, that of the services that we offer, which is right now like therapy services. We also do some psych assessments. Well, I assist you with that.
And that's kind of what brought us here today, right? Was that we were doing this psych assessment and we're like, a lot of people don't realize how traumatized men are, like, and how that trauma is stigmatized. But then I said, yeah, but that's not just specific to men. There's like a niche in the Latina community, right? And one of the things that we talked about was, how come nobody talks about that, right? But the first thing I want to talk about is, are we going to say Latinx? Are we going to say Latina? I mean, I have been schooled to, do the A and then the O. Like, what are we going to say? Because we want to be culturally sensitive here. We don't want anyone to think that we're leaving someone out, right?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because honestly, like I consider myself a Latina and I feel like I'm still figuring that out. I'm still like trying to understand like I personally I feel like I want to embrace Latinx for the simple reason that to me and my understanding, it's all inclusive. Like all it's not non-binary, it's supposed to include everybody versus, obviously like masculine, feminine, Latino, Latina. I'm used to Latino, Latina. I like I said, I think moving forward I'll give kind of that disclaimer of like, look, I'm using because I know there's other political stuff behind it, and that's not my reasoning for using it. My reason is exactly what you just said, to be all inclusive of culture, gender, all of those things. So let's use Latinx.
Okay. We'll use Latinx and then we'll move on from there. And no, everybody, we are trying to be inclusive. We are not trying to exclude anybody or not use the right terminology, but things keep changing in this politically correct world. And we really want to be sensitive to that. So even me as a Black person, I don't use African American. And it's not that I don't feel like I don't have roots in Africa. It's just that I identify as a Black American versus someone who is from Africa because I don't understand that culture and I want to be sensitive not to say that. So just know we are trying very hard to do that and we're not trying to leave anybody out or be culturally insensitive in any way. So with that, that brings me to my next thing. we did a wonderful thing too, just to catch people up. I had my book club help me, but you really did help me because I wrote His History, Her Story about male survivor trauma and violence. And then I did the LOU course and I said, oh my God, I have so many Spanish speaking people who want to know about this because it's such a taboo in the community. And here's the book right here. You can get it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. My brother does all the wonderful artwork and everything. But Crystal actually helped me, translate this and get this together out there for readers. And so, Crystal, why don't you talk about how male survivor trauma, especially in a Latin community, is something that nobody talks about. And it happens, right? And there's different types of trauma, right?
I think it's something like I follow a couple pages on social media and I've seen that it's slowly starting to become something that people are addressing, but it's been, I mean, we're in 2023. Like, how is it taking this long for people to finally start talking openly about this? But I understand why. I've thought about this a lot, and I think I've kind of boiled it down to three big reasons. The Latino community or Latinx community is so diverse, right? There's a lot of different cultures, different regions, and where I'm coming from is I'm Mexican. I identify as Mexican slash Chicana because I feel like I definitely have. I grew up here in the U.S. and my mom considers herself a Chicana. I grew up around that culture, so Mexican Chicana.
I just love how you say Chicana.
I love it. I'm telling you, I've been like, identity development. I feel like the past couple years I've embraced it. Before it was something that I was like, I don't know. Now I'm like, no, I'm Chicana for sure. The three big reasons why I think that men don't disclose, they either don't disclose for a very long time or a lot of them, they never disclose. In our culture, you sweep things under the rug. You don't talk about these things. You don't talk openly, not even about, about anything sexual. Yeah, no, it's taboo. You just don't go there. And also, family secrets, you don't put your business out there. You don't talk to other people about it. It's something that brings up some shame. You don't want to bring shame to like the family. So that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is a lot of times the perpetrator is in the family.
Yes.
And it's usually, it's close family. So, uncles, cousins, parents. So that's another big one. And then the third thing is masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
I know because I've talked to male survivors and I hear what they're telling me. And my understanding is that like they were afraid that someone was going to question their sexuality, their masculinity, if they were sexually abused, especially by a male, that they were demasculated somehow. Those are like the big three There might be other little nuances. I mean, if we get into other cultures like Cholo culture or something where it's like you don't snitch, you don't tell on people, but those are my big three.
Yeah, and that's across all male survivors, but the one of the things that you're speaking specifically to is that familial piece and that machismo piece. Am I saying that right? Because I always
Yes, machismo.
yeah, because that is really important. But in working with cases, and you've seen me talk about this, and we've, talked on cases. A lot of times it happens within the Latinx family, but they don't say anything because some of the males, like, it's kind of like that's what you're supposed to do. There's like a culture that if you are servicing the other men in the family, you don't talk about it. And that is like your role in the family. And nobody would believe you. And what are you doing? Because this is our family. This is how we interact with each other. Right?
Yes. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right because I think you're touching on this piece of like there being something about the dynamic in the family because this is something that happens over generations.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this passed down. Obviously, it's not, rite of passage is not the right word, but it becomes something that it's like, yeah, this is what happens in our family. It's an unspoken thing, but you don't find out until later. And you're like, what? So this didn't just happen to me. This happened to my uncle and,
Mm-hmm.
him and back forth all the way back to grandparents. And, you find out later. And I don't know if it's because of the size of the family because I know there's a lot of back there's like 8 kids, 12 kids in the family. I don't know if it's at what point, like when did this start happening? Because I know it's been happening over generations. So I do think you're onto something with that. I agree with that.
There's some weird generational thing that goes on. And one of the things that I see, and you correct me if I'm wrong, in the Latin culture is that because a lot of things are not talked about, swept under the rug, a lot of things are put inside. So they somaticize the symptoms, right? So a lot of my male
Mm-hmm.
survivors who come to me, they'll come with stomach aches or that they're throwing up or they have diarrhea or they I hear Crohn's disease a lot, right? And then I start peeling back the layers and they've been having sex with their uncle since they were 5, right?
No, for sure. I know I've had a lot of my clients have like, especially males. So all the clients that come in, the symptoms they're talking about having GI, gastrointestinal issues, all the stuff you're touching on. Sometimes headaches, sometimes fatigue, but there's something definitely about the gut that they come in complaining about those symptoms. They don't say they're depressed. They don't say they're anxious. Maybe they don't have the language for that or yeah, they somaticize it. So they come in complaining about physical symptoms. But they don't even tell you. Sometimes you just find out because we administer questionnaires that are asking about the physical symptoms. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I have this, 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 and this.
Yeah. And speaking of that, like when they come and see you, how hard is it to get them in the office? I mean, that's one reason why we use questionnaires to get the information, right? But how hard is it to get someone, of a Latinx background to sit with you?
You know what? That's what in my previous job in office where they would come in for medical legal issues, but they would often disclose sexual trauma. But the only reason they came in, if they didn't have to come in because they had some legal issue, they would have never gone in.
Right.
And even then with the medical stuff, I would have to be on top of like on it, sending reminders and sometimes they would skip. But the funny thing is in the beginning, it was hard to get them to come in, but once they came in, they would show up every week.
Yeah. And is there something called personalismo that you have to do to get them to connect with you? Like, yeah, explain that because people don't get it, and sometimes it takes a lot of time because you're establishing that personalismo, right? So explain what that means.
You know what? I feel like I've had to do it so much that I don't really think about it. And I didn't think that it's like an extra thing I have to do, but it is. I have to relate to them. I have to basically prove to them and show them that I'm trustworthy, that I'm relatable, that I know some of the things, that I understand kind of like where you're coming from, and I'm not gonna judge you, But yeah, the building up the relationship, because that's my understanding of, personalismo. Is like, even reading about it is so weird, but it's like, oh yeah, I do have to do that. That is what I do. I use a lot of sayings that like my grandparents taught me. That's definitely an advantage I feel like I have, because I have that kind of that old school like upbringing, because of my grandparents were a big part of my life. But that's how I relate to a lot of my clients, because a lot of them, they're obviously, they're older than me, a lot of them, and I have to show them like, I know what's up. I know what's up with the culture. I know what's up with you, and you can trust me, and I'm not going to judge you.
Right. And the fact that we both look young, we have to keep reminding them that we've lived a few miles, right? And that's part of the culture too, being a woman, going in there
Oh
and
my God.
doing that. Yes. And so what are some of the things you have to say to build that personalism or get that respect, right? Because there's something called respecto too that you have to get.
Yes. My tíos would say like, respeto, respeto.
There it is.
Yes. Um, sometimes it's unsaid things, like just being quiet and listening to
Mm-hmm.
them, giving the eye contact, being a good listener, being quiet. I know one of the things that a huge thing I've learned from you, if there was ever one thing that I would take with me, it's like, if a male survivor discloses to you, shut up and listen. I think that's true for this as well. Like I definitely speak Spanish a lot, because there's a lot of things that can't be translated. So like I said, like when they come in, I'll usually say, look, yo entiendo que a veces que tú no estás acostumbrado, I'm going to translate, but I'll say, yo entiendo que tú no estás acostumbrado a hablar con alguien. En nuestra cultura no se habla de las cosas, no se habla de lo que nos ha pasado, pero aquí este es el lugar para hacer eso. So, that translates to, like, in our culture, we don't talk about things. We don't go to somebody that we don't know and start talking about our personal business, but this is the space to do that. And I'll throw in, like, take your time. Take your time. So that's like a little spiel that I'll give them in the beginning. I definitely work on the rapport building first, and then eventually they end up opening up a lot faster than you would think.
Right. And that's one thing that I have learned. And there's a lot of times I refer people to you because I know people may feel more comfortable being able to talk in their native language or someone who understands that, right? I can understand Spanish a lot, but I can't speak it. And that makes a huge difference in the space, just like it may make a huge difference in the spaces if you were French speaking, right? Because if you were in France, because it's your native tongue, there's certain things that just do not translate, right? And one of the things that I urge people to do, especially if you're not a Spanish speaker like me, is say, well, say it to me in your tongue, because then you can see the expressions that go with it and you can kind of get an idea of what they're saying to you, right? So I never like say, oh, well, you have to speak to me only in English. I say, no, tell me in your native language. And eventually I'm going to pick up on those nuances and then they can interchange English in it. And I'm following completely along. And that's another part of cultural sensitivity to certain environments and populations that a lot of people don't get. It's just if you're willing to sit in the space, and that provides that place where someone can become comfortable with you, you know?
If they start to open up in their native language and they get in that flow, they might end up saying something where they're crying.
Yeah.
That they hit on something, whether you understand what they're saying or not.
Right. And that's a beautiful moment, an interchange of culture there. And then when they're ready, you can say, tell me everything you said. I think I got it. And you can say what you think you heard just from their body language or just from what you picked up. Right. And that's going to show how much you're just really in it with them, you know? And it's especially with children. That's something that I want to touch upon a little bit, because when you have a kid who's disclosing, then it's completely different than a grown adult, right? And so tell me some things that you have to do with a kid, especially in a big Hispanic family, right? Because there's some nuances there that people don't realize when they disclose to you.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. So I did my full-time internship in a community mental health setting, and I worked with children and adolescents, and undocumented immigrants and children who were undocumented immigrants. So that's a whole other layer. I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that I would have to spend a lot of time physically. I would sit in a position sometimes we would sit on the floor. We would sit in a position where I could make direct eye contact with them and I could be at their level and make them feel safe. Just like with adults, it's more of like building trust. I mean, it's the same with kids. Ultimately, you're building trust, but safety is a big component, I feel like, especially with them, because look, to be honest, a lot of times you're talking about the family dynamic. You don't know, this kid's afraid that if they say something, they're going to go home and get beat. They're going to go home and they're going to get hit because they've been told before they walk in. I know how it is. Before they walk in, the parent will be like, no digas nada. Don't say anything. No le digas nada a la señora. And then they'll scare them. No, si le dices algo, te van a llevar de la casa. They're going to take you. So they come in already apprehensive, not wanting to talk about the sexual trauma. And then on top of that, being afraid that they're going to get in trouble or be punished if they do. So you have to kind of remind them, both with your body language and with what you're saying to them, like, I'm here to help you. I know this could be scary, and with kids, you don't use that many words. A lot of it involves play because they will play out some of the stuff. If you have a kid who's not disclosing to you, but something happened, because where I worked, a lot of times you did know they came in and there was a known history or at least an accusation that there was some type of trauma or abuse with them. So we would do a lot of play. I had my little figurines that I would take, or we would do imaginary play, and they would play out some stuff that you knew, like, oh, where's that coming from? So you kind of just approach it.
Yeah.
So you approach it with curiosity.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Approach with curiosity. Like, what's that mean? Right? Be curious with them. Not say, oh my God, why'd you do that? Now say, oh, wow, that's interesting. Or you always, like, kids love wide eyes. They love, like, oh, well, let's play that out. Right? Approach with curiosity. And if you do that, kids are more likely to talk to you because they don't feel like they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, because, okay, like back to the beginning of our conversation about shame and guilt, the minute that you do that, they're going to shut down. If they feel that shame and guilt come up because you looked at them like, what is this? Like, they're going to shut down.
Completely.
Yeah, that's what I love working with kids. Yeah, as sad as it is, and it's like, it breaks my heart, getting them to open up and to be able to talk about those things was like, wow, that was one of my favorite times of my career.
And there's something that I always tell people to do if they can, is like, if you can get the child by themselves to be able to talk to you in a place that they would feel secure and safe, that's going to be better than you having the parent in the room, because they're afraid, especially if they think they're going to go home and get hit with the chocolate,
Oh, yeah.
they're not going to want to talk to you. I remember a kid telling me that. He's like, man, if I talk to your mom's going to hit me with her chocolate, she's going to hit me. Like, I mean, he's just going, and I'm just like, okay, do I report that? Like, what does that mean? Like, but I'm realizing you're laughing because you know what I'm talking about.
I'm laughing because I know, yes. Yes. The chocolate or whatever's within reach. Yes.
Yes. And he's telling me this, and I'm like, okay. And I said, okay. So I would separate, and I would see him by himself, or I would make sure mom had her therapy going on at the same time. Right. So that way she couldn't interact and it could be free flowing. And there's some cultural dynamics to what he's saying, that versus abuse versus him just trying to talk to me, that were different. And I had to take that into consideration. But the other thing that, I think is important when you're working with in a culture that's different than you, is to get consultation. I call Crystal all the time. right? And I
Mhm.
say, hey, you don't have everybody's experience, but you have your experience, right? Or I had someone else that I would call that was my mentor, or depending on what the culture is. We're talking about Latinx community here, but also I would call about an African community because I'm not connected, right? I don't know what's going on. But I remember I had a guy who was Irish. I'm like, okay, who do I know that's Irish? Because I'm there's some stuff here that I don't quite understand, right? But it's always better to consult, right?
No, I think that's huge. I think it is better to consult because you don't want to make assumptions and you want to be you that oh my God, that cultural sensitivity piece in therapy, like it's nice to have somebody who's the same who comes from the same cultural background as you. Like obviously, sometimes that's ideal, but that's pretty impossible in our field. Like a lot of times you're not going to get somebody that is from your same cultural background. So want to you definitely want to have that sensitivity and that understanding to know when to consult, to
Right.
know like that might mean something else instead of judging and saying like that's weird or like if you don't know it's probably something that's related to their culture, so that's the time to ask about it because that's what's going to keep the report going and might get them to open up, especially if they see that you care enough to like figure something out and one little thing, one little nuance and you caught on.
That's going to be a game changer. And the other thing that, is when we go to court, we have to say that we looked at it through many lenses, right? Just because I'm Black or you're Latinx doesn't mean that we have every Black or Latinx person's experience, right? So,
Yes.
how are we going to support our judgment, even though we are that? How did we look at every aspect of that, right? And then we say, well, I consulted with people, I did this, and I got all of this information. You want more than enough information versus having the information of just your experience alone, because that's not being culturally sensitive, right?
No, and people pick up on that. If you're just trying to, pretend or you're not making that effort, they're going to know.
They're going to completely know, right? And that's the one thing that we have to be sensitive about, because being a male survivor, just to bring us full circle, right, is a culture within itself, right? And then you have the intersection, you have the layers of being a male survivor in a Latinx family, or being alone, like, there are some Latinx families that are very small, right? Or you're the only person left because of trauma, because of violence, right? So what does
Oh
that
my
look like
God.
when you get someone with violence and trauma coming into you? It's not sexual abuse, it's violence. Like how different is that?
I'm like not I'm shaking my head and I got the tingles because I know I've seen it in other families, but I've also experienced it in my own family as far as the violence. Like, I'll just give you a little like background, but like, okay, in my maternal side of the family, there's eight. There was eight. Of the eight siblings, that's including my mom, I think four of them have passed away. That's that's half the family. Four of them have passed away. One of them is in prison. The other one it was deported and is living in TJ in Tijuana, Mexico. Pretty much all of them except for one has dealt with it. He's either been in prison, passed away, or had dealt with alcoholism or substance abuse. And the only reason that I'm sharing this is because I know this is not just unique to our family. There's so many families that have all of this trauma and exposure to violence. It's different because there's so many layers and sometimes the person isn't even aware until they start opening up about it because they're so used to it. This is just their life. They don't think that like, oh shit, this isn't normal. Excuse my language. I don't know if we, but
It's a podcast, we can do what we want.
I'm like, it's not, they don't think that it's not normal and they don't realize how much they have been affected. Their thinking, their development, the way that they view the world, all of those things are affected by this exposure. Their relationships,
Hmm.
They don't have relationships. Talk about, either being from a small family or coming from a family that isn't tight knit or doesn't have that level of closeness. Everybody's living their own life. And so what do? They a lot of times seek out toxic relationships because they're looking for that love. They're looking for somewhere to belong, somewhere to fit in. One of my theories is like a lot of times they end up back in prison because they don't have anywhere else to go. They're so used to it. That's what they know. That's what they know, and they know once they're in there, they already know how that world works. So why am I gonna go out into the big scary world when I know I'm gonna get my food and a place to sleep and some social interaction?
Right. I know people who feel safer in there, who feel better in there. And I can actually, when I go in the prisons, I feel my safest. You know why? I know what's there. I know what's coming at me. I know where security is. I know what to do. I know what not to do. It is so structured. And I'm in such a little box that unless you want to screw up, you really can't, right? And so I can see someone who's never had that having a safety blanket of being in there, right? And so it is very, very different. But it is when you have violence and you have trauma, but you have your whole world is, well, I'm gonna end up in prison anyways in life. You have nothing to look forward to, right? And so your relationships, people who've had trauma have substance abuse issues, but you talked about relationships. I have people who come in and want to see me. They don't get why their relationships never work out. And every time they tell me about it, they keep dating the same person. Right?
Yes,
It's what
yes.
you're picking because of you, but they can't see that they're dating the abuser over and over and over again.
They might not ever get it. And that's where, like, talking about the development piece, if we get a little bit into like, the physiology of what happens when you experience trauma for a prolonged period of time over repeatedly, right? Like you're in all kinds of different types of violence. Because when we're talking about things like violence, I mean, that could be gang violence, it could be domestic violence, it could be, violence that you witness in your community. Sometimes you're not even that's not even part of your lifestyle, but you grow up in a neighborhood where you're hearing, gunshots or helicopters, constant noise, police sirens, all those things. So those things affect
Right.
your thinking,
Right.
your long-term thinking, your ability to foresee things and to think of things in a complex way, which is why you can't see the patterns of
Right.
what's going on with your relationships. So you stay stuck. You stay stuck in that loop of dating the abuser because of the familiarity.
Or dating the toxic, right? I can't imagine how many times people have told me these toxic relationships. And I'm like, do you really want to continue to go down this path of you're doing this to your life? Okay, because you're making these choices, and it's hard for people to understand that the choices they make and the rippling effects, what that does to the kids, what that does to them, and it's just a circle, and that's another thing that you have to look at the cultural patterns, right, that go with that.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes they do know, but they don't know how to get out of it. Sometimes they do have the awareness, but like either they don't know how to get out of it, or they're so used to, like, I guess in a way, kind of like the using the idea of the prison as a metaphor. They know how that kind of relationship works. But I don't know how other healthy relationships work, so I'm just gonna stay here.
Right. And that is the thing that is the key for everybody, is that they don't know what it looks like. And that's how come they end up in our office breaking their taboo, their silence, and sitting there with one of us, because nothing's worked so far. I can't tell you how many 55-year-old men have I sent you who've called me who are Latinx, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I'm like, and they're ready. They're ripe. I'm just like, okay, go see them because they're ready because they're ready to break that silence, and that is the thing, and listening to that, and they need that help to push them along their way, right?
Yeah. I don't know what it is about the 50s, but it's definitely a tipping point.
It's a thing.
But I do get a lot of 55-year-olds and who are questioning their relationships, and they come in thinking something's wrong with me. Like something's wrong with me. Something's not right. A lot of it is anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know. They just know they're worried all the time. They're worried all the time. They can't sleep. They have all the physical symptoms. They just know something is wrong. And a lot of times it's like, it's your relationship, it's your partner, it's the way that you're interacting with people, it's affecting you. And they come in, you know what? A lot of men come in because their work is being affected.
Yep. And they're the breadwinner, or they're socialized that way, right? So we have to wrap up, but what is something, since we're on this topic, that you want to leave people? I love people to take away something, a solution or a way to get help, or something you want them to get from what you're saying after you've said all of this.
I think the biggest thing I want for people to take away is really, I know this seems so simple, but it's like, don't judge people. You don't know what they've been through. Especially people, if you're not from that culture, if you don't understand, but you see somebody dressed a certain way, talking a certain way, living their life a certain way, there's a reason why. There is always a reason why somebody behaves or does what they do. Be mindful of that, because you don't know.
Right. Don't be judgmental. And they can also get Dr. Debra's book that's in Spanish, that was translated by Crystal Flores, and look for her upcoming course on the Listen and Love University that will be in Spanish about this topic, right? And
Yes.
her discovery tour that we hopefully will do in Latin America about this. So you go to the website, you go to drdebrawarner.net, and all this wonderful stuff is there. And you can also contact Crystal at the Male Trauma Institute, because she is my director of that, and you can talk to her and see her because she's taking clients right now. So anything else you want to add, Crystal? Because you have been a wonderful guest, and I know that people are going to get a lot out of this. You talked about the Spanish culture, you gave them some terminology, but you also gave them the warmth of your heart. So anything else?
I think the right now that you mentioned the book, I'm like, yeah, you know what? If you feel like you want to start somewhere, but you don't know where to start, and you're afraid to go to therapy, or it's too unfamiliar, find something else that's therapeutic to you. Go to a group circle, read a book, do some dance movement, do some type of expressive art, anything to get yourself moving. Yeah, go maybe move your body, dance some cumbias or something. But anything that gets that flow going, do it. There's not one way to heal.
No. What was our favorite thing to do during Script, which is our male trauma conference that Krista helps me with? We'd go eat tacos, remember? We'd go hide and eat tacos.
Yes. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
that place
yes.
closed. I still remember. But that was our thing, was to do all our work, and then we'd go eat tacos and just sit there. So sometimes you just have to find those little moments, right? So
it's true. I love the chewy chips.
The chewy chips.
I'm thinking about yes. They're like crunchy. Yeah.
Bags of those. I have to have my daughter. She can do it. She's a chef. Make us some chewy chips.
Yes.
All right.
Go do something that makes you happy.
Thank you, Crystal, for everything. I'll talk to you. We talk almost every day, but thank you so much. And this was just so informative, and I hope someone gets something out of it. And if you need us, again, you can look at my information below, or you can contact me on drdebrawarner.net.
Thanks for having me.